Flash, an opportunity to enjoy some really wonderful stories. We're on a quest to find the winner of the Edinburgh Award for Flash Fiction, which is open to writers worldwide, and the Golden Hare Award, which is a special prize for the top story entered in the competition by a writer living in Scotland.
Today we're going to hear 5 stories. These are Lucky by Anne McLaren, 9 Minutes by Graeme McGay, Wasps by Marianne Taylor, The Oakwoods by Louise Farker, a Trackside fairy tale by Julie Evans. Unfortunately, Marianne was unable to join us, but everyone else is here. Welcome. How are you all feeling?
Hi, everyone.
Good, thank you. At the end of the show, our judges, the award-winning authors Zoe Strachan and Louise Welsh, will tell us which story they've chosen to advance to the final. But remember that while we're going to enjoy some wonderful readings, the judges' decision is entirely based on the written word, not on any of the performances.
Our first story is Lucky by Anne McLaren. Anne says she gets most of her ideas from eavesdropping, and she transforms these into stories, articles, poems, dramatic sketches, and flash fiction. Some of these have won prizes, and many have been published in magazines and anthologies. In 2019, her first short story collection, Handle with Care, was published, and she's now back working on a novel.
One of my bad habits is going for a run in a bus, or it used to be before COVID, and listening to conversations in buses. And I have a series of poems called Overheard on the Bus. Lucky came from my father, who was a gambler, and he never had any money, but he liked to gamble, and he always tried to get money out of my mother if she had any spare cash. And he did this by flattery, we could see, and she usually fell for it. But underneath the flattery, there was that sort of undertone of superiority. He just couldn't quite let her have the upper hand, you know. So, but unfortunately, she usually fell for the flattery.
First time lucky, Dolly. Haven't I always said it pays to take a gamble? You need to be careful, though. It's not a fortune. But of course, you can splash out a bit, treat yourself. Yes, I know it was your ticket. I'm just trying to help. I know what you're like. You want to spend it on the family, spoil them. They won't thank you for it. Oh, a new car, is it? Your old one's fine. It's not as if you go anywhere. Anyway, they're all computerized nowadays. You'd find it very confusing. Tell you what, I could put half of it away for you, somewhere safe. Your own wee nest egg. Be there when you need it. Oh, I won't put it on a horse. Of course, if the right one was running, if a dead cert was whispering in my ear, I could double your money. Know what I'm saying? But I'm not asking for a penny for myself. Nothing. It's all yours. Though I know you wouldn't grudge me something for a wee bet. Share and share? Listen, Dolly, we can talk about it later. Let's go round to Malone's and celebrate, just the two of us. Maybe have a meal. You won't want to be cooking after a couple of glasses of Prosecco. Or champagne. It's entirely up to you. Then we'll have an early night, eh? It's been a while. Here's your jacket, Dolly. Don't forget your purse.
I love that story.
You're a champion. All your stories have been reviewed about 40 times to get to this point. And I have to say that this was Linda's champion story.
Thank you, Linda.
Well, I tell you what, Anne, I have no drunken father, no gambling father, but by jings, I've heard so often that, well, take your purse.
Yeah.
I loved all the unspoken words, all the things you could hear her saying on the other end of the conversation that weren't actually said. It was really cleverly done, and I loved the language. It was so authentic.
Well, thank you.
Our next writer is Graeme McGay. Graeme's a writer from the outskirts of Glasgow, and he graduated in 2011 from Edinburgh Napier University with a degree in English and Film Studies, before embarking on a career in television post-production. In 2014, he wrote and starred in a feature film that premiered at Edinburgh International Film Festival and which was nominated for the prestigious Michael Powell Award. When not working or writing, he can be found at home wrangling his rampaging toddler son, 22 months, on countryside walks with his tireless dog, 45 months, or curled up on the sofa watching a film with his lovely wife, 394 months.
I started with the first line, and I really didn't know where I was going with it. I've always kind of been interested in what happens to you when you die. So I'd written that first line. I like to just get something down on paper, even if I don't know where it's going, just so that I'm not looking at a blank screen. It kind of helps me, I think. From there, I thought it'd be quite nice to write a story that completely was turned on its head in the last couple of lines, potentially. So that's kind of where it came from.
They say when you die, the soul departs your body, and you're able to look down at what used to be you. I'm standing in a morgue, looking down at myself. My long dark hair matted with blood. My complexion just off human. And my fingers as cold as the stone that cracked my skull. Except it's not me. Not really, anyway. I always said he was a maniac. I always said he was putting on a facade. I knew he had a temper and I knew he was dangerous. God knows I told enough people. But no, I was wrong. You just misunderstood, claimed my sister. He's a nice boy, said my mum. He's a top bloke, rebutted my dad. I knew better. And now here we are. I really did know better. Not that it brings me one iota of comfort. As I look down at the face before me, I know I'll see it everywhere I go. Every morning in the mirror, every fleeting glance in a window, every selfie to come. You said he'd always be 9 minutes older than me, sis. I really wish you were right. I turned in my heel, knowing I'd never see her again. And yet, see her everywhere, forevermore.
Well done.
Goosebumps.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful story, yeah.
Really.
That's quite a surprising ending.
Yeah.
Good
That was the goal. I kind of wanted to turn it all on its head, so you kind of think you know what's happening, and yeah.
And you don't. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Marianne Taylor, who wrote the story Wasps, was unable to join us. She's a daughter of librarians and a lapsed martial artist. So she says she's basically a nerd with a hint of badassery. She writes about science and nature, but this is her first foray into fiction. She is a friendly loner who loves words and water and everything wild, even wasps.
Her thoughts were too slow, and his too fast. His thoughts were his words, and his words were wasps, rushing in from all directions, each with a sting to deliver. They could not be evaded, endured, or deterred. It was minutes or hours later that she decided to drop her arms and raise her head. She opened the front door and walked out into the street, and they followed. Her head was in a cloud, and the cloud was Wasps. She measured her steps and counted her breaths in and out to keep her slow thoughts ahead of her and away from the pain. She followed the footways to the coast, stepped off the promenade and surfed down a steep shingle breaker to the shore. She undressed, and as she exposed more of her skin, so the wasps struck again and again. Her blood was slow and heavy with their venom. The stabbing stones softened under her feet as she walked into the water. The sea's weight gathered and carried away her own weight. The stones fell away. The salt burned and soothed. The buzzing in her ears grew faint as the wild waves sang more loudly. When she realised the last wasp had fled back to land, she turned in the water to look at the frantic figure on the shore. But he was small now, distant, voiceless and harmless. She returned her gaze to the deep darkness before her and began to swim.
That beautifully poetic.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Isn't that amazing? That's her first work of fiction.
Really? Is she a poet?
Well, it seems so, doesn't it? I mean, it really is very, very beautiful.
It is.
Louise Farker is our next writer. She was born in Dumfries and has lived in Glasgow since moving there to study law. She's a keen travel writer, blogger, poet, and short fiction writer. Her story, Mum and I, was published in New Writing Scotland 35, and she's currently working on her first novel.
The Sale and Oakwoods are in Ardnamurchan on the west coast of Scotland, where I've had family holidays since my own children were very little, really special holidays. And I've taken many walks with my children in these very, very ancient, very old woods. And I decided to set the story there, but from a very different perspective than mine. So the story's about a couple that can't have children and how they come to terms with that. And in my own life, I've found that when I've had to accept things that maybe I didn't want to accept, I've found natural environments a very good place where that happens, you know, whether it's a deserted beach or forest or mountain. They're very restorative, nurturing places where you can, you know, come to terms with things and maybe face up to things you don't want to face up to. So that was what I tried to reflect in the story. There are problems to be solved, decisions to be made. Hand in hand we walk and walk through the Sale and Oakwoods, past ancient trunks gnarled with moss and bark. The earth, thick with amber leaves, falls steeply to the river's bank, where branches ride the tangled water until caught by pewter rocks. Children call to each other through the faint whisper of the trees, their bright jackets darting like fireflies in the dusky light. They bring our walk to life. I think of the time past since the first test, when we waited for the colour change, surprised when it didn't. I thought it was him. Time and test came and went, like the ebb and flow of the river, until facts showed it to be us both. It was pleasing to know. Our loss became blameless. Tendrils push upwards at our feet, the saplings of these woods breathing for long days ahead of knots and lichen and old age. I dreamt of birds last night, layered in rows, finely balanced on narrow branches, orderly and expectant. I think of them now as a hooded crow sweeps overhead, choosing not to stop and gather like my ethereal friends. Our hands hold fast, thumbs and fingers weave together. Yes, Our decision is made, and our problems eased. Not to fade, but to lessen, just as the woodland quiets when night rests a dark head. It was, and would be, just us.
Lovely.
Incredibly evocative of place. I loved your descriptions. They were just sublime, beautiful.
Wonderful. And that idea of the birth of nature and the mother not being able to give birth is very poignant. Yeah.
I meant to ask you, Louise, the significance of the crow, was that special? Because in the Native American, the crow is God and brings peace. It's not seen as a bird of, we tend to see it as associated with evil. Was there a particular reason why you chose the crow?
Yes, I think crows have quite a spiritual quality about them. Mm-hmm. And birds also often appear to people in dreams, and how they appear can be very reflective of their thoughts at the time. So in this story, she had seen them and they were quite ordered as her thoughts were coming together, and she was, getting some peace there and some order in her life, where sometimes birds can be not ordered, and then your thoughts are really quite scattered and disorganized. So that was what I was sort of trying to bring into the story.
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah. I love the simplicity of your last line. After that rich language, it was just so simple. I think it was beautiful, really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Our final story today was written by Julie Evans. Julie took up writing 4 years ago. She was selected by Val McDermott as winner of the Daily Mirror Crime Competition 2020. She's also been placed or shortlisted in a number of other competitions, including the Historical Writers Association, in which the judges described her work as original and clever, bursting with colour and character.
I'd heard a lot of cases, particularly in the area where I live, of teenage suicides that were attributable to bullying, or several cases. And one particular one was the son of a friend. And I had coffee with my friend, and she'd just been to the funeral of the boy who was a boy in that case, who had killed himself on a railway line. And she was saying how terrible she felt about the mother who was standing there amongst this was before COVID, hundreds of thousands of people being looked at as the mother of the one who had killed himself. And how that must feel to try and stand up and be there in that situation would be so difficult. And that was kind of, I think, what inspired me to write the piece. It's not a happy piece, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about.
And when I finally go to the place you chose, the sun is out. Wildflowers stipple the sidings, crane spills bounding pink from the grass. And on the fence, a danger sign. 1,000 dying shop-bought blooms are pinned and hung. Severed stems protruding from cellophane, petals crushed inside the twists of wire. They call it community mourning. Counsellors wait in classrooms. Mothers hold their children tight. There but for the grace. And you are the tiny green peas smothered under the mattresses of their imagined griefs. But I feel the shape of you. You black and bloomy, kick against my diaphragm. Once, pink pajamaed, you asked me for stories. Tell me once upon a time. And I gave you a witch in every tale. Hags climbing hair, offering a shiny apple, tempting with a gingerbread house. I thought witches were just figments, but here they are amongst the crowd. They are not old, they are children, come to snap the scene with their phones, their pocket instruments of torture. Old messages are deleted. New ones have appeared. Clichés of angels and bright stars. Tell me, my beautiful girl, which ponytails are theirs? Whose nails tapped vitriol on glass? Whose mouths flashed curses between molar bands and arch wires? What do I do? Perform my grief? Ululate? Clear a path, here she is, the star of the show. And I hear your voice on the wind, echoing through the tunnel, travelling along the steel rails. Go home, Mum. You're embarrassing me.
Oh, yeah,
Goodness.
that's powerful stuff, Julie. Thank you.
So the mother seeing the children as witches, I thought that was good.
Yeah, because I think so often people don't think about what they're writing and what effect it'll have on people. I think that really stuck with me. I think since becoming a dad as well, reading that sort of thing just terrifies me. That last line is really great because you can imagine it. You can imagine a kid doing that. But yeah, it's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we've heard all stories and experienced some really wonderful readings in this heat of the Flash Bash. Sarah met with the judges earlier to find out which story they have chosen to advance to the final.
Zoe and Louise, those are the stories from the second heat. We've got Lucky, 9 Minutes, The Oakwoods, Wasps, Trackside Fairy Tale, another really broad set of stories.
You know, one of the other things that we've not mentioned yet is also what fantastic titles people have used. Because just when I heard you read all of those out again and hearing them in a list, I thought, were I to open an anthology, that's why I'm always thinking out of titles for short fiction. Which one would I go to first in terms of the title if I was looking at the index? These are all really great titles.
Yeah, Trackside Fairy Tale is a brilliant title, and in the best way, an awful story, but such an awful subject, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Oakwoods really sort of invites you somewhere else. What am I going to find when I open this story and when I start reading the Oakwoods? Lovely,
lovely writing in the Oakwoods, isn't there? It really made me think of walking and all that, how important our walks are now in lockdown. And then 9 Minutes, a great twist, and at the end of that one, just skewing our perspective at the last minute. But I think that sometimes twists in the tale can just be too obvious, or you can feel a little bit cheated by them, can't you? And I think flash fiction is the place where actually you can really work with a twist in the tale and do that thing where you do skew our perspective at the end of the story. It's definitely the form for it for me, and I thought that one really worked. The voice of Lucky was the voice is really present and really there. I like Wasps a lot. I really liked the way, I thought it was really clever to pick one metaphor and center the whole story on it. I thought that was very good. And it was an unusual one, it wasn't predictable. I don't know, but I chose to think of the ending as having a note of hope to it. It might not have that, but I was really kind of willing the ending to be a hopeful ending, although it's got a nice ambiguity to it.
But it's making a really great virtue out of the short form. It's taking the short form and doing something with it. Not just thinking, okay, this has to be a shorter story. This is a piece that delights in the short form.
I keep coming back to the Oakwoods in this round.
I guess it's the story that after reading it, as I walked about, it was the one that would come back to me and that stayed in my mind. So I think
it's a really good selection, and so diverse in terms of topic. I like that in Lucky the reader knows something that the character doesn't. I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, we have to make a decision. You've got to say
I think yes, on reflection on this one, I think it's the Oakwoods.
Hey!
Well done, Louise.
Well done. So how do you feel, Louise?
Well, I feel absolutely amazed because I'm listening to these other stories and quite overwhelmed by how amazing they are. Just really quite blown away. So to have my story picked is just a real privilege, but being part of the whole thing is a privilege. I really honestly think it's amazing, the competition. And I think in this format with the Zoom, and at a time when we're also lonely and we really need a bit of something, it's just been, for me personally, a great thing to be involved in. And this today's been lovely as well, just meeting everybody and sharing all these amazing stories, just very humbling. So thank you so much.
Maybe in the future we'll be able to do it in person, which would be lovely.
It's actually my first flash fiction story I'd ever written, so it's went quite well. I'll maybe continue it.
I'm just looking forward to the next one now.
Stories you've heard tonight will be published in our next anthology and will be available to read on our website for the next few weeks. We hope you'll join us tomorrow for another episode of Flash Bash 2021. Bye for now.
Bye.